and Jam. Today we have a really packed schedule in front of us, and we're going to even try a little bit of a discussion group, which we haven't done the last few coffee and jams, because the feedback we've had is that everybody misses seeing each other and networking with each other. So before we kick off today, I just wanted to ask if all attendees could mute themselves. When we get to the Q&A and obviously the discussion and the shout out, you'll have a chance to speak and we'll unmute you at that stage. But for the moment, we just want to keep the background noise to a minimal while we're going through the Q&A. Basically, I'm Marian Johnson. I'm the Chief Exec at Ministry of Awesome. And we have a little bit of a new format of Coffee and Jam for the last 4 weeks, ever since we've been in lockdown, where we brought the whole South Island startup community together, which is really fantastic. So today, actually, we're going to be emceed by Angus Pauley, who is a big part of the startup Dunedin team, which is doing incredible work down in Dunedin. And we're also joined on the call with Coin from Southland, and also from Startup Queenstown with Olivia. So shout out to everybody there. Now, Trees put up a slide that shows you who's in the South Island startup ecosystem, which we've just gone through. And now we're going to talk about the agenda for today and who we've got assembled. So today we're going to be talking about founder well-being, mindset, and mental resilience. So there's no doubt that being a startup founder is not an easy choice. There's so many challenges and so many challenges that you're going to have to overcome, and you're going to need a lot of strength in dealing with adversity throughout that journey. We've got some really good speakers today to take us through that. And the first speaker that we're going to be hearing from is Derek Hanley. So he's probably one of the more well-known New Zealand entrepreneurs. He's the founder of Hyperfactory, Snack Media. He was co-founder of B Corp alongside Richard Branson. And he's also founder of Era VC. And he's coming to us today from Titirangi. We've also got Will Joseph, who's an Edmund Hillary Foundation Fellow. He's also one of the co-founders of Co-Starters, which is a startup program that many of you will already be aware of. And he's founder of a new venture called Good Startups, which deals with founder resilience and well-being. So we're really pleased to be welcoming Derek and Will today. So looking quickly at the agenda, we're basically going to start off with a Q&A with Derek, with Will. After that, we're going to get into a Q&A from all of the participants. So if you've got a question, you can either put it in the chat box, or you can raise your hand and we'll unmute your mic. After that, we'll go through some shout outs. So if you've got anything going on in your community, make sure you share it. Don't be shy. And right now, I'm going to hand over to Angus Pauley, who's going to be emceeing the rest of the event, and I'll be talking to you guys a bit later. Angus, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Marian. I'm really excited to be here and involved in Coffee and Jam. I've been a long time kind of watcher and listener, and now to MC is a pretty cool opportunity. So we're going to start off with Derek with a bit of Q&A. So Derek, are you ready? You got your mic unmuted? Awesome. Sweet. Yep. So Derek, the first question I wanted to start with was that every business or startup has highs and lows, and no doubt, you know, with the history that Marian's just rattled off, you've experienced a few of those yourself through your journey. As a team leader, how do you keep your partners and teams motivated when you can see things in the business aren't going so well, or you can see a storm on the horizon?
Okay. First of all, hello everybody. Thanks for having me. It makes me think when all this finishes, I should really visit the South Island startup scene. I haven't been there for a very long time, and was almost lured down there by the Otago Business School peeps. But I look forward to it when I do get down there. So I think the question around motivation. So things aren't going well. I think it really depends how badly they're going. So I don't know, you know, the scenarios that the dozens of people on this call are facing, but 5 weeks ago, I gave a presentation about what scenarios I thought founders could face in this environment. And for many of them, it will be existential. Like this may be the end of the beginning of the end of the company, or it may be the beginning of a total reinvention of the company, or maybe just a case of battening down the hatches and hunkering down. So I think the different scenarios require different types of responses. But the main thing that I think is really vital, especially in these times, is truth, is integrity, and kind of vulnerability from a leader. And the challenge within that, because it's easy to say that, the challenge is you still need to be confident. So you have to be confident because a leader is, people are following and expecting and looking up to people who are leading organizations. If you are at the same time totally vulnerable, but at the same time a total mess with no concept of how you're going to get out of it, then people start losing hope, motivation, faith, inspiration, ideas. If you are believing that everything's going to be fine and you're going to get through this, and you're not realistic about the issues and realistic about the fallout that is likely to happen, particularly on the staff and customers and things, then you get a whole other set of issues where people just look around and think, what is this person smoking? So I think in these difficult times, what's most important is communicating with kind of truth and vulnerability at the same time. Like, we don't know all the answers, you can't know all the answers, but you're going to ask the right questions. And that helps get people along. What really hurts is vacuums. So vacuums of communication, not bringing people along. You know, in a time like this, 2 weeks can feel like months because the world keeps changing. So constant, frequent communication, even if you're repeating the same thing, even if you're repeating, we don't know any more than we know on Monday, than we knew on Monday. We don't have any more visibility in the next 2 months than we did last Thursday, but here's what we're doing. Here's what we're trying to do to stay around. Here's what we're trying to do to grow. So constant kind of communication. The last thing, I guess, to round out that would be, again, it depends on what you're doing. If you're trying to hit some, you know, kind of moonshot or some ball out of the park, like, you've got to keep connecting people back to why they're here. Because in startups, people work really hard. They put a lot of effort in, they put a lot of energy in. And when things get difficult, if they can't remember, why is it important what they're building? Why is it important, the company? What is this thing that they're trying to solve? Like, what's the vision? If you keep getting caught up in the day-to-day and you just grinding it out to get through a period like this, if you don't remember to lift people back up and remind them this is why we're here, then there's a whole other set of issues that fall out where people go, why am I doing this again? Why would I want to do this? And the reality is, a lot of people will maybe ask that question anyway about the business that they're in these times. They'll be like, why am I in this company again? Why am I doing this job? This is not who I am. And you'll see a lot of people leave companies in the next few months and the next year, some by choice, some by no choice because they'll have to be made redundant, and others by choice, realizing that it's a moment for them to look at things and go, this isn't actually what I want to spend my time on. So being clear about vision and why your company exists is critical to kind of moving everyone through the period.
That's a really interesting answer. And I guess there's sort of two questions which spike out of that for me. And there's, you're mentioning, you know, talking, having that constant communication. Hey, this is our plan for our next steps. This is how we're going to, you know, mitigate our risk or continue to grow. Obviously, some of those plans are going to need to involve your immediate team. Is there a rule of thumb for how much of that thinking you should do on your own to make sure that you have confidence before you talk to people, and how much that you should actually get everybody around the table and involved with?
Yeah, it's really hard because, again, it's to do with the size of your team. If there's only 5 of you or 3 of you, it's kind of tough, right? You've got to, it's also to do with the distance between founders and employees. So there are certain employees who are more like founders. They might have some stake in the business. They might have always had contribution to the strategy and the direction. And there are other employees who are just doing a good job, but they don't want the burden of the bigger issues of the company. And also they may not be able to handle them. So you may have in your company a couple of people that you always discuss the existential issues, and you trust each other implicitly, and you can protect the other team members from that discussion. If you have these discussions totally openly, the downside is it can cause a lot of people a lot of stress, because a lot of the decisions are out of their control. They don't know maybe necessarily how to handle them, and they'd rather you as a leader express things with more clarity and you having processed a difficult decision. So it depends on how big your team is. If you have other external advisors who you can work things through, that's probably better. You know, you can start working things, you can put different directions or ideas out there that are not going to threaten anybody because they're not in the company, they don't have a dog in the fight, they're going to look objectively and help you through it. But one of the other principles that I shared in this presentation that I did to founders a month ago was, no one, as much as you want to believe this, no one will ever care as much about your company than the founder. So even if they're super loyal, they love the business, they love you, and these times, they first and foremost care about their security, their livelihood, their families, and then the company. In the best of times, they're just like you, they're like a founder. But really, only founders can understand what it feels like to be in this situation, because only founders will, at the end of the day, go to the ends of the earth to protect the company, whether that's putting a mortgage on the line or whether that's taking no pay for a year. And so having that conversation can sometimes only be had with people who are in the same camp. So whether they're founders on this kind of call or whether they're other founders that you might know, it sounds like kind of like purist to say there's two camps, but in essence, in certain things, there really are certain conversations that only founders can have with founders. So, you know, it depends on your team, but I would want to talk to people outside and other founders.
I think it's some great advice, getting an external perspective of someone that doesn't have a vested interest. That's a really good idea. In terms of what you were talking about before with vision and making sure that you share that regularly in times like this where it's really stressful, and say, hey, this is the big overarching goal or thing that we're trying to achieve. Is there a regular practice or something that you use to make sure you're introducing that to your team? What's the way that you do that in a practical sense?
Well, every company, again, if they're more kind of startup-y, you know, venture kind of startup, they're going to have some sort of a vision, a reason for being, right? So if they're out there raising money, they're building a tech company, they're building some sort of future-oriented product. Normally, that's at the beginning of your story, right? Why you're here, what kind of company you're building. And times like this will wash out how clear you are on that. It's like, you know, it's like when the tide goes out and you look at underneath what's there, like it's like your underwear is showing. And if the vision is not clear, if the articulation of why you're here is not clear, it's times like this that will illuminate that. So normally you should know already what you're here to do, what you're here to solve. It's just more about reiterating it, recommunicating it, you know, sharing it in a positive way, because that North Star is why people get out of bed, right? They also get out of bed because they want to work with other people, they like their own job, but the North Star should be the reason why they chose your company. Obviously, it's got a different parallel if you're running a cafe or a local shop. There's still a reason why that shop exists. There's still a reason why that restaurant was put in place. But if it's not really motivating or inspiring, then it's not going to have the same effect. So it depends what kind of company you're building. But if you're building a startup in the sense of the startups that, you know, we talk about in the venture community, then right now is a time where your vision and the reason for being will be challenged. Like it has to be so sharp and so clear so that it can convince you that it's worth doubling down and tripling down to get through the next, you know, year or two.
Absolutely. So I guess one of the themes that's been popping up through some of your answers is this notion of team and how to communicate within that team. Obviously yourself, you've been a member of several new ventures and consequently new teams. Do you have any advice for someone that might, about how they might best approach forming and working with a new team, in particular around disagreements?
Okay, so this is just like general question, like nothing to do with COVID, right? Just new teams.
Yeah, just
move in a totally different direction.
Yeah, we can move in that direction. If you want to give an answer more COVID specific as well, because I realise there's probably disagreements around that too. But
teams, I think, yeah, I think it's different depending on the scenario of where you are in the team, in terms of where you are in the life cycle of an organization. If you're talking about a founding team, I think what's critical is that you flesh out, in a sense, what you value. like what's important to you. And most people as individuals don't necessarily do this anyway themselves. So the team environment is a great way, reason to sit down and say, well, what is important to you? You know, is persistence important to you? Is punctuality important to you? Is integrity important to you? You know, and create a set of shared ideals that you agree will always be upheld in your team. I think those kinds of things are useful practices that, you know, not enough of organizations do, and I've been guilty of that in the past as well. That's more of your kind of cultural spirit. Like, what is the spirit in which you're building this? The second kind of thing to really get to the bottom of is what motivates you. Like, what is it that's motivating you about this journey? And it's okay if it's different. Like, it's okay if for one person, it's, I want to get really, really good at this job, or I want to really make a lot of money building something and show that I can do it. Like, but understanding why people are in the game in the first place is really helpful, because then you can know which people are coming from which direction. And the last thing is getting really clear about what people are good at and what people are not good at is helpful too, like what strengths and weaknesses they have, and also what thinking styles they have. So getting inside, well, how does that person think, and why do they think differently to me? It's not a bad thing that people think differently to each other, but understanding where people come from in terms of how they think is super helpful when you're having, you know, team building teams. And there are tools online that will help you to assessments that will show you, well, this person is always going to come from a point of conservative, or always going to come from a point of anxiety because they want to protect what we've built so far. And this person is always going to come from a point of projection and the future and development, because that's just the way they're wired. It's not that one's better than the other. It's just that when you start to understand where people are coming from, then you can have much more dynamic and meaningful conversations as a team. Those are some of the key pieces, you know, like the values pieces, the motivations, and then the thinking styles and skills. When I put a team together, you know, we're a venture fund at the moment, building a venture fund. We have a few partners, and in the back of our presentation, it looks like almost like a player dashboard that you would find on like a football trading card or an Xbox game. And there's like a little spider diagram that has these core strengths that we want in our team. And you see some of us kind of have our little diagram over here, and some of us have our diagram over here. But if you layered all our diagrams on top of each other, the whole spider chart would be full. And that's kind of what you want. And we chose that as a way to visualize it, because when people were looking at our deck, they can see, oh, that guy is the guy who's really strong at this guy, and he's really weak at that. And they kind of overlap each other, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Would you say that that's something that teams should regularly revisit as well, as a way to remind about different communication styles, and
yeah,
some of the other points you touched on?
It's super hard unless you build it as a practice, but it's super important. You know, I think, again, this is where external help can be really valuable. And I'm actually thinking about this right now in one of the teams I'm involved in, which is you can have external coaches or facilitators that can help you have conversations amongst your team that will be easier when someone else is coaching the conversation along than if it was just the three of you, for example. At Human Ventures in New York, where we were building lots of founding teams, we started to use the services of a founder coach, of which there are, you know, not many, but there are more now than there ever used to be, but it's still like a handful. And we would use the coach to help us understand the dynamics of this potential co-founder or this potential founder, and whether we thought they would be the right person to build a company with. And then once that team was started, we had a program where that team would meet with the founder, the coach, every couple of weeks, so they could keep that cadence of some third party holding space for them to have meaningful, real discussions. And I know this is something that probably we'll talk about, but for me, coaches for founding teams and coaches for founders is like the fundamentally most important thing about the next wave of building companies to me. I think both on the mental health side, but also on the way to ensure your team succeeds and survives. Because maybe someone's done an analysis of this in the past, but my instinct is one reason, or one of the top reasons why many companies die is the implosion of the founding teams. And it may be that the team imploded because they ended up so incompatible, which I've seen in the past for sure. Or it may be that one person imploded because they were not addressing the mental health pressures they were putting on themselves. And they basically drove themselves into the ground because they couldn't speak openly with the team. And I've seen that happen in the past too. And what that looks like is quite literally, everything's going fine, everything's going fine, everything's going fine. Friday, 3 p.m., the guy comes in, drops all his shit, pushes it all at you, and disappears and leaves. And that's happened to multiple companies I've seen as an investor. And you don't want that. And what's that about is like people just keeping it all inside to a point where they can't handle it anymore, and they just literally implode. And so if you build these practices in the beginning where there's space to talk, there's space to be coached through ideas, there's space to grow as people collectively, recognizing that each of us are weak at some things and good at other things. Some people are really good at talking about how they feel about stuff, other people aren't. Those things will be, I think, the fundamental almost expectations of companies going forward. The question people always have is, oh, it costs money, it's expensive, and all that stuff. But the ROI is, I think, 100x if you're spending a few grand a year on having some very qualified professionals help you through, these kinds of conversations and team building exercises.
Absolutely, that's a fantastic answer. I just got a quick message letting me know I've only got 2 minutes left to ask you another question. So I'm gonna finish on this one, and it's a little bit more of a personal one, but along the same lines of exactly what you were talking about. So what resources, tools, or exercises do you personally use to regularly check in on maybe your mental well-being and your resilience?
Well, I have a coach. I've got 2 coaches. I've had a coach since 2008. So I've really, for a long time, had support externally. And that is very helpful. When I have built certain practices, so I try to meditate every day, try to have exercise every day. I try as much as possible to build a lot of time. Some people would say too much time to think in the calendar. So for many years, for 10 years probably straight, Friday mornings from 8 till 12 was just for thinking. And again, the retort is, how do you have all that time to think? And it's almost the opposite for me. If you don't make the time to think, that's when everything gets on top of you. So when I find that I'm feeling this pressure and I'm struggling, I know what's gone wrong. I haven't made the time to think, and I haven't made the time to separate myself from the work. And lastly, when things really feel like they're coming on top of me, at least for me, my practice is put it all down again, put everything down again, start the whole list of all the things you need to do all again. The exercise in doing that is quite cathartic. It helps you organize the pieces. It helps you see the prioritization of them. And so these are kind of some of the practices that, are more practical. In the last few years, I've gone back to university. Again, people would say, where you have the time to do that? That really motivates me. It inspires me. It is like it's like leisure in a sense. Of course, it's work and all that stuff, but that time to me energizes me. It's like the gym for my mind. So that has become a really meaningful part of how I stay, balanced, see perspective, and stay on point, or try to stay on point. I mean, let's admit it, the last 4 weeks with my 1 7-year-old and my wife in this house, hey, it's been difficult. We cannot pretend that the last 6 weeks hasn't been hard. It has, but these habits at least, have helped. And the last thing is journaling. I write a lot. So I have a notebook, try to write. That helps you get your thoughts out, helps you express what it is that maybe is in here or in here, and play it back to you. So none of that's rocket science. I think you'll find that a lot of people can promote these ideas to keep you sane.
Awesome. I think it's really interesting to see someone that performs at such a high level still making time for some of those habits, because for a lot of people, those are the first things to go when the pressure comes on. So I think it's a really, really timely reminder that for whatever those habits are for ourselves, and if people are looking for them, there's some great ones to pick up from yourself. But just to keep those practices, especially when the pressure comes on. I can't remember who it was, but I remember someone talking about how when they were stressed or they knew they had a big day coming up, they meditated more, not less. They made more time when they were busy. So
that's, I think it's a quote from someone like Gandhi. He's like,
yeah,
today's a big day. I'm going to have to meditate 4 hours instead of 2. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Hey, and if you're on par with Gandhi, then you're doing well. So
Definitely not, but yeah.
Hey, thank you for that, Derek. We're going to look back into some Q&A from the audience after I interview Will, and there's already been some interesting ones coming through on some of the points that you touched on. So really looking forward to that. Hey, Will, how's it going?
It's going all right, man. How are you?
I'm doing
a great job.
Well. I'm doing well. I'm feeling inspired already. Hey, so as president of Good Startups, and obviously having spent over 3 years at Co-Starters, I'm sure you've seen many founders experience some of those highs and lows, like what Derek was touching on, like we were touching on before, which really challenge people's resilience and well-being. And obviously with yourself, having been a co-founder and things, you will have experienced some of those highs and lows too. So do you have any regular practices, tools, or resources, kind of building off that last question I had with Derek, that you've picked up through your experience of either watching other founders or just through being a founder yourself that you try to fall back on?
Yeah, I'll kind of piggyback off what Derek said. Almost everything he listed is a great. I mean, we've seen a lot of people use them. We've heard the benefits of it, and similar to him, I do my best to experience those benefits as often as possible, not perfectly. I mean, from journaling to meditation, to just being still, to breathing, taking the time just to take 3 breaths. 3 deep breaths will do amazing things for your understanding of how you're fitting into the world at the current moment. But the one that I have really appreciated that I think is a little bit different than normal is finding something I'm curious about that puts me in a state of awe. The ability to find something that just utterly impresses you and reminds you both of, we're in the middle of a very hard time, but seeing something incredibly beautiful, even whether it's for me just trying to take 15 seconds and really watch my children and just appreciate them, changes my perspective of everything else that's going on around me. And that can be true of hiking through the woods. It can be true of watching ants on an anthill. Like, there's so many things that are happening that are beautiful that we just pass over. There we go. There's one right there. Awesome. Hello. But yeah, finding something just to get curious about and to really experience awe recenters me in a way that reminds me that the whole world doesn't depend on me, which I often think that it does, and allows me to let go, and then really allows me to remember, like, oh, okay, I'm gonna make it through this. And so I think there's a lot of different things, but that's one that has been really helpful for me.
Absolutely, and I definitely get what you mean in terms of that regain of perspective. It's that whole thing that, the common sort of trope about looking up at the stars and then immediately feeling, how small you are. So I definitely get that. And
yeah.
Have you had some conversations before with founders that have been approaching burnout?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of one that I've had with a founder that probably isn't.
Yeah,
I feel like
sure.
we're all in that spectrum in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. So if a founder does approach you and they're saying, hey, well, I'm really struggling, I'm approaching burnout, how does that conversation typically go? What sort of advice do you normally give them?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's to look at the idea of burnout and feeling kind of the different stages of burnout and kind of what it does to you personally. I think if you've identified it, that's a huge thing, to be self-aware enough to say, I think I'm burning out, and then to have the courage to actually step up and say, I'm going to do something about it. The first thing to do from my perspective is just, if I'm interacting with somebody, is to say, well done. Like, thank you for being vulnerable. Thank you for taking this step. Even if you're wrong, it's a great thing to be asking that question not over and over all day, but enough that it's frequent that you catch yourself when you get to that place. And then to really kind of turn the question a little bit of like, okay, now this is a chance for you to step back and really evaluate where you're at. And I think the way Derek said it, like, something is not aligned. Most likely, if you're really feeling this, And it might be not aligned professionally, and that's definitely an option. It might not be aligned personally. It might not be aligned spiritually. It might not be aligned psychologically. There's all kind of different ways that if we're out of alignment, it impacts us. And so the question then is to step back and say, all right, it's okay. This is part of humanity. You're a human. As much as we're really trying to bring our best self, which is awesome, we're not always able to do it because we're all human. And so, and it might not be you, it might be what you're experiencing. I mean, as Derek was talking about the different dynamics that go on within a team, they're infinitely complex. And so to just, okay, rest, take a second, and then let's examine what's going on. Where are you in each of those different spheres? How are you doing? Where are you feeling that discomfort? Really kind of dive in and try to understand what's causing it. I'm not actually getting any time with my family. Well, maybe you need to spend more time with your family and it's not a work issue at all. Maybe your identity is too much in work. Okay, it's not, I'm spending time with the family. Okay, maybe it's, I need more time with friends, all right? There's all kind of different aspects of life that we need to re-examine. I think we've kind of been sold a little bit that in order to be a successful entrepreneur, you have to be business all the time. 18 hours of work a day is good. And I think humanity tells us a little bit different. It can happen for a stretch, but for the long-term sustainability of all of us, we have to get things a little bit more in balance. So let's look at the different pieces, see what's there, and then see it as an iteration. No shame. Whatever changes you need to make, iterate, take that step, grow, and seek to improve. And it's not going to happen overnight. One little afternoon of meditation is not going to pull everything away. It's a slow and steady process to change. And then to, ask the hard question, do you need to leave this workplace? Do you need to move on to a different idea? What needs to change? And let's get serious about it and see it not as a failure, but as an opportunity to grow and thrive and to really become who you're supposed to be.
It's really interesting asking that question of, is this time to iterate or is this time to stop? Do you have any kind of rules of thumbs or guidelines about how that conversation goes? Or I imagine it's pretty reliant on who the individual is and what their situation is.
It is. And, I think the interesting thing about it is, when it's time, who's to say, so to speak, because I think the other thing that we need to embrace is that hard times, we benefit a lot from hard times. And so again, it's not necessarily a right or wrong thing. Like there's this exact moment where every founder needs to step away. Like, no, you just need to know the risks and you need to have confidence relatively that either way, you're going to be okay. And you're eager to learn whatever you're going to learn from whichever path you choose. And so to me, it's just, I love kind of what Derek said about getting the external advice. I think you find those people you trust and you get out of your own head. And if every single one of your advisors is telling you, look, you should probably stop, I think it's probably worth listening to that. If all of them are saying like, no, I think you just need to switch that, maybe but you've got the choice to make. You're going to wrestle with the results one way or the other. And so getting wise information, taking that time and trusting that whether you stop or you go, you're going to have to iterate, you're going to have to grow, and most likely you're going to be okay. It's an important piece to that question. And then when you make the decision, go for it.
Awesome. It's a fantastic answer. So obviously you've seen quite a lot of founders come through good startups and as well as co-starters. When it comes to well-being and resilience, is there a common misconception or a common mistake that founders typically make?
Yeah, I think the one that, you talk about burnout. The one that I see kind of most often is the idea that I can change everything. There's a silver bullet. There's one solution that'll solve all of it. Like if I just push really hard right now and then I get through this time, everything will be okay. And I think that's the illusion that a lot of us have, is that there is going to be one day out here where everything's going to be okay. And I think what we're learning is that if you're not okay with where you are right now, you're not going to be okay with yourself when you get there, because it's the same you, and nothing's ever as easy as we present it, or we think like what we think it will be. And so I think the challenge is to take the steps today to be okay with yourself today. And then wherever you are, when you try to get to that goal, you will have learned to be okay with yourself. And so from that perspective, I think the idea that it's not about this silver bullet, this trick, this quick fix, it's about a daily process of becoming more and more okay with who you are each and every day, no matter whether it's an easy day or a hard day, a good day, a bad day, whatever terms you use, a success or failure, a learning day, a not learning day, however you want to phrase it. If you can learn to be okay with each and every day, which is a process, then you'll be okay. And that's an important piece.
Awesome. Hey, those were some fantastic answers. You've actually managed to wrap up all 5 of the questions that I had for you. So thank you so much for that. So much for that, Will. We're going to move into some Q&A from the floor. So the way this will work, Derek and Will, is any of the questions that I pull up or someone says over the mic, either of you can jump in and answer. So feel free just to go for it if you feel like there's an easy one, or avoid it if you feel like it's a tricky one that you think is too hard to answer. So we'll start off with one that was just sent through over chat. It's actually labeled question for Derek. How do you go about finding a good business coach, and what should you look for in a business coach when you do try to find one?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a real mystery. Will may have better versions of this answer than I do. First of all, what I was talking about was not a business coach per se. It was a coach, like for yourself. So I've never had a business coach. I've had a coach who sometimes helps me with business problems like managing or dealing with a situation I'm uncomfortable with. Business coaches, I don't really know what the good answer for that is. Finding an actual coach, my only good answer so far on this is by referral, because I don't know any other way that can give you the outcome that you deserve, because everyone I think deserves a coach who really can help you. And what has happened, for better or worse, in the last, let me say, 5 years online, is that coaches have exploded. People who have decided they don't know what to do with their life, a lot of them have decided to become coaches. And this is highly problematic, because they might go and do some coaching courses and they might then take clients on. But when it comes to drawing from actual real world experiences and things, it's quite challenging. So I'm very nervous about those things. I hope Will has some better ideas, but so far I've only got through my chain of coaches in terms of the ones that I've had over the last year through referrals.
I'll add in, I'm nervous always when somebody says, I want to hear from Derek, to add in, but the thing I would ask people to keep in mind when you're looking for coaches is it's okay to walk away from a coach. I think a lot of times coaches are seen and they're given the label as being right, and they're given some extra special magical power. And I think you need to realize that they need to fit with you. I've had really good coaches and I've had some bad coaches that I was like, this is just not working. But yet I felt some obligation to stay in it, and maybe the issue was me. And maybe the issue still is me, but I can't see it. And so if I can't see it, I still need to act in a way that gives me life. And so if the coach really helps give you life and wisdom and speaks to you and still challenges you, I think that's the important piece. And to a certain extent, I've seen trained people be bad coaches, and I've seen untrained people be really good coaches. So kind of find what works for you, but know that you're looking at another human and another equal, not somebody with all the answers. And I think that'll help you kind of have that power to then step out and try it.
But maybe, if there's interest in the community in New Zealand, we should try and surface some that we think are good for founders and give some options, because I don't really have a useful answer for you. The only other thing I would say is it doesn't matter where they are. They can be anywhere in the world. My current coach is in Vancouver, and I've never met her in my life. So, it works.
There you go. Awesome. Hey, next question was, how do you get away from your startup when you get home at night? Added on, it's so hard to shake it, always returning to your startup problems, planning, worries, etc., and having it bleed into the parts of your life that it shouldn't. For example, a Sunday walk with your partner or reading a story to your kids. Any thoughts on that?
Will you take it?
All right. I think it takes practice. I mean, I hate to say it. I think the culture that we've grown up in, almost all of us, I can't speak for everybody, but the culture I've grown up in has defined my success by the success of my company. And I think it takes work now to actually step back and say, I will be okay even if the company fails. And part of the reason I can say that is because I am more than my company. And so like I'm talking here about my work, but when I shut this down, I'm going to go talk to my wife, and we're not going to talk about work, and I'm going to talk to my kids. And you've got to be able to actually focus on that, get a hobby, do all sorts of things to help you grow, because you can actually control more of that sometimes than you can the success and failure of your company. There are things like COVID that happen that you just can't do. So the more you can actually build in other places that give you that foundation, help you separate out what happens at work, even for a founder, what happens at work can only go this far. And I'm not going to say how far that needs to be. That's different for all of us, but try to begin to set those limits, because if there are no limits, then you and your company are the same. And that's a really tough place to be. So we've got to practice setting those limits so that we can then enjoy the walk with our partners. We can then enjoy the moments with our kids. And that's why I really practice just taking 15 seconds to watch and enjoy my kids. It's hard. It shouldn't be, but it is.
I think I've heard a good analogy with what you're talking about in terms of self-esteem. And, work's one basket, maybe your sports team that you play on the weekend's another basket, your wife and your family is another basket, your friends are another basket, and you never want to end up with all your eggs in one of those baskets, because too much of your self-esteem and too much of your identity is tied to one thing.
Yeah, we practice that with investing. We don't put all of our investment in one area because it might go down. So.
Absolutely. I've just had another one come through about financials and market. It says healthy financials and market validation aside, when or what are the indicators that signal the time to fold and walk away? So I think this is more tapping into that maybe it's along the similar lines of our mental health and resilience question from before.
I don't know, I think that's a really difficult question. Obviously, the financials are going to give you an indicator if your company isn't in the shape that it needs to be. One time when you really get to ask that question again is if you are going to have to, let's say, raise money from somebody, because if you're going to have to raise money to keep alive and keep growing or do something like that, then you're going to have to sell somebody the idea that you're in this for the long haul, or at least for a few years, 4 or 5 years. Same thing would be if you're taking a loan from a bank or something. If you're getting more resources from someone else, at that point, it's a very good point to question whether you would feel strongly enough about this to be there to give that person their return or their money back or whatever it is in 3, 4, 5 years. So that's often a particular gate that can help you. If there's nothing to lose, like if it's all wound down and you're kind of having to start from scratch again anyway, which I think a lot of businesses in this environment are going to be in a similar situation like that. You can then also rethink the next 5 years. If I could start again, if I wasn't looking at my sunk costs per se, if I wasn't looking at, I've spent 5 years into this thing, like it's my reputation, it's my life. If you just put those things aside and say, well, given where I am today and who I am today, would I want to spend the next 5 years on it? That's the conversation you want to have. And if it's convincing and inspiring and you still want to do it, then absolutely you should continue. But if there's really any sense of significant kind of wavering that makes it like 50-50, everyone has doubts. So if it's a 5% niggle and it's like, oh, I don't like this on Fridays, but every other day you love it, then that's probably the right indication. But if every day you're asking yourself the question, then, you know, that's probably the time to really sit down, get some space, and rethink whether this next chapter of your life should be the same story. And, you know, a lot of people take a lot too long to do that, because it's tied up with your ego, it's tied up with your reputation, it's tied up with your identity. And it's to close something, people think is an admission of failure, but sometimes it's just an admission of wisdom. Like, you are just going to move on to a new part of your life, and that's totally fine. I don't think there's any shame in that. The shame is keeping it alive by a head and it all collapsing and people really losing out. You know, creditors not getting their money, employees not getting their severance, those kind of things. It's a way worse way to finish.
Absolutely. I think that is all of the time that we've had for questions. There's a bunch of thank yous flooding into the chat for both Derek and Will. So thank you guys so much for sharing. I think we're going to move into the breakout rooms, and then are we going to come back for the shout outs, Marion? Yeah, awesome, cool. Sweet, everyone. So you should have an invite to join our breakout room now. So feel free to jump into that breakout room. It's going to be a chance to have a little bit of a discussion about the content with those other people in your room. And then we'll invite you all back to do the shout outs just after that.
Hey everyone. Hello? I think you guys are mute. Hey guys.
How about you? Yep. Bit lost.
Just have to succeed easily.
Yeah.
See most for you.
Yeah, isn't it weird?
You gotta be present and enjoy.
Yeah. Definitely.
I really quite like the idea that we have a lot more conferences and meetings online now that we all actually realized it's actually possible. Hello.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey Trey, how you doing?
Hey guys. Hey Tina. I'm actually the
Hello.
person behind the scene. In my room, no one was talking. Yeah. So
I didn't know that was an option.
Yeah, I should have explained it more clearly in terms of, you can unmute yourself and start a video and introduce yourself.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
yeah.
I was going to explain it more, and then people started leaving, and so I was like, oh, I'll just give a very quick overview.
Yeah. That's all good. I think people are talking.
I think you can, as host, you can broadcast a message to all attendees as well. So if you want to let them know anything now, you can do that, and you can send it to all the breakout rooms so everybody gets that bubble.
Okay.
Because we use this quite a lot for our Audacious program. Also, you might want to check on what room Derek and Will are in, because they might be getting swamped with questions and everything in one room. Yeah.
That's not realistic at all. I'll have a visit at other rooms. Please carry on.
All right.
Okay,
Sweet.
no
Good
worries.
to see you, Tree.
Good to see you.
Yeah. The idea is an online service for public speaking, and it's to help people with, or just to actually give people some opportunity to practice, because so many people I spoke to before I started often said things like, oh, I used to go to Toastmasters, and but I don't go to it anymore. And I figured, okay, how can I bring it to people? And that's the idea behind it. And also, it was really ideal for everybody being locked inside and not being able to attend their regular public speaking meetings. So
Yeah.
I kind of missed the boat.
No, not at all. I'm sure there's still a call for that. You should connect.
Danielle, yeah. Your microphone's turned off, Danielle, down on the bottom left corner. Oh, I haven't found it.
It's possible they just they may have gone even.
Yeah.
I think you automatically get pushed into the breakout group.
For about 3.
Cool.
Hello.
And,
I think we are now coming back. I'm waiting for my MC, Angus.
Yeah, people are coming back now, Marion, in
Okay.
15 seconds. So they're given 30 seconds or so to come back to the main room.
Oh, I just hit the button immediately, Tree. I'm just, super efficient that way.
That's good. Yeah, 2 rooms and weren't really talking, and we could have done a better job kind of explaining, but it's okay.
Damn. So we're now going to move on to shout outs. So at this stage, this is basically anything that you want to talk about, anything that's happening in your community, any upcoming event. And I might just start off by asking Will to shout out a little bit about the project that he's working on. He's got an event coming up reasonably soon. Will, can you unmute Will for me, Trey?
I think I'm unmuted.
Ah, there we go.
Yeah, we've got a bunch of partners. Oh man, I didn't have to pull up the slide. Well done. We've got a bunch of partners pulling together to just recognize that these are really hard times. There's a lot of fear and anxiety going around, and we're trying to think through how to work through that, or we're trying to help people work through that. So we've got Breaking Through the Pandemic, You can sign up. It's a 4-week class to kind of help you just kind of recognize where you're at and work through some of the issues that you're facing. And register by Friday.
Okay. And is it?
That's a shout out, right?
Is it
that long?
That's a shout out. Is it free, Will?
Perfect. It is free.
Okay.
It is free.
And it says in the blurb that it's only for tech entrepreneurs. Is that the case, or are there any exceptions?
Dill, are you on here?
She is on here, but I don't know if her mic is unmuted.
Okay, we are allowing exceptions. So if you are interested and you're not a tech entrepreneur, then absolutely apply and join us.
Okay, great. Is there anything else going on in the community that anyone wants to do a shout out about? I'm not seeing it coming through on the chat, because if there isn't, we'll just move on. But if there is, we definitely want to hear from you. You can also put your hand up if you've got something you want to shout out about. I'm going to go once, twice, 3 times. Okay. Well, we have a shout out. We've got Startup Breakfast Club coming up on Thursday this week. And at Startup Breakfast Club, we've got Andy Hamilton, the director of House Ventures, and obviously one of the co-founders of Manaki.io. I saw somebody put the link up for business advice for small businesses. Andy Hamilton has been a major leader through this time, having founded Manaki and a couple of other things, and he's been featuring a lot on Radio New Zealand and across the airwaves, helping to provide a kind of a good leadership voice for the startup and small to medium-sized business community in New Zealand. So if you want to hear about Andy's thoughts on leadership and have a chance to have a chat with him, come along to Startup Breakfast Club on Thursday. We've also got Kirsty from a group called Vargo and Lewis, Kirsty Lewis. She's a fantastic coach, and she'll be talking about leadership as well. I've worked with Kirsty on a number of different occasions with the Ministry of Awesome team as some of our startups, and she really knows the territory. So she's definitely worth hearing from. So that is Startup Breakfast Club on Thursday. Our next Coffee and Jam is going to be on Tuesday, the 2nd of June. So this is the last episode of Coffee and Jam running on a weekly basis. I think it's come to the time where after 4.5, 5 weeks, we're all pretty sick of webinars. And a lot of us are sort of, nose down, tails up, just working hard on our business to see how we can make through and how we can, work on getting some good runs on the board over the next wee while. So Tuesday, 2nd of June is the next time. We're going to be returning to a community gathering where we'll feature a startup that's less than a year old, and then another startup a few paces ahead, just talking through what they're working on and looking to the community for feedback and support. So we'll send a follow-up email out on that upcoming Coffee and Jam. And so before I say goodbye to everybody, thank you so much for coming along today. A huge heaping of thanks to Will and to Derek. Really have found the advice and the discussion incredibly useful. So many good comments along the way. Some key things that stick out for me are, I think, Will, you made the point of identity and how you are not your startup. That's something that we really need to hold close at heart and remind ourselves of, especially during really challenging times. And Derek, I know that you've obviously experienced a rapid growth and difficult times in your previous 2 startups, and I know that that's something that those challenges are scars that you've had to get through yourselves. And so the wisdom that you've shared with us today is even more so poignant in that regard. Really interested also in the work that you're doing with coaches, and I'll be following that up separately here in the community. So thanks so much, you guys, for joining us. Watch out for the survey coming out through your email. It would be great if you could give us some feedback so we can just keep getting better and better. Thanks very much, everybody, and have a great afternoon. See ya.